It was 3:43 in the afternoon when the text came in. I was sitting at my desk, and the message was from a fellow pilot, a man named Michael, on a thread of people who all loved the same man. I can still remember the words. I just received this news from Debbie. Jim has passed away. Jim was a mentor. 9 days earlier, he had gone into the hospital waiting on a liver transplant, and now he was gone. I had 17 minutes. In 17 minutes, I was scheduled to sit down for a first coaching session with a couple that I'd known for years. It was our first time together as coach and client. And what's more, later that evening at 6 p.m., I was supposed to stand in front of a room of aviators and speak about the very thing that Jim had dedicated his life to. What I did in those 17 minutes is what this episode is all about. Every life has moments that change everything. A phone call, a diagnosis, a decision, a door that opens or a door that closes. These are the moments that matter most. I invite you to be there with me in one of those moments right now. Together, we'll discover the lessons, the resources, and the inspiration you can carry into the moments that matter most in your own life. First, let me tell you who Jim was, because you need to know not only what I lost, but what the world lost. Jim Hesseman was one of the most quietly remarkable people I've ever known. For more than 3 decades, he flew volunteer missions. He flew patients to treatment they couldn't otherwise reach. Families in crisis. He rescued animals. He did it for Angel Flight West, for Flights of Life, for Pilots in Pause, for anyone who needed a lift that they couldn't find on their own. Jim served as the president of the Air Care Alliance, the organization that connects volunteer pilot groups all across the country. And in 2023, the National Aeronautic Association honored Jim for his work and called him a volunteer pilot whose generosity and compassion exceeded all expectations. But here's one part that really tells you everything about Jim. Jim founded a program called the White Feather Flight. The whole purpose of the White Feather Flight was to take people who had just lost someone they loved, people in the rawest hours of grief, and to fly them, to lift them up off the ground so that for just a moment, they could rise above the pain and see possibility again. That was Jim's life work, teaching grieving people how to rise, lifting people who were feeling down. I knew Jim through charitable aviation. I was the wing leader for Angel Flight West in Arizona, and Jim was one of my volunteer pilots. Though the truth really was, he was far more qualified to lead than I was. But he never made me feel that way. Jim was a gentleman. Jim was a constant student. Jim was someone who listened more than he spoke. And when he did speak, people listened. I have a sign on the wall of my office to this day. It was what Jim said in receiving that award for aviation excellence, for his commitment to charitable aviation. Jim said this: do as much as you can, for as long as you can, for as many as you can, and in an airplane if you can. That was Jim. And on June 24th, 2025, Jim was gone. For most of my life, I didn't know how to grieve. In fact, the truth is, I don't think I really knew how to feel at all. I truly believed that feelings got in the way of progress, in the way of success, and so I pushed them away, all of them. I never got too happy or too sad, too high or too low. And then in the space of just 2 years, I lost my mother-in-law to cancer, and then my father-in-law to cancer, and then my dad to a massive stroke. Three of the most powerful anchors in my life, three of the people who I loved the most, were gone between 2018 and 2020. And grief did not visit me politely. Grief moved in and it took over. The reality is I had no idea how to deal with that much grief. I surrendered to suffering, the sadness and the despair. And all of that would rise up out of nowhere and pull me under. I felt like I had no say when it came or how long it stayed, and it nearly destroyed me. So when I tell you that on the afternoon that Jim died, I was able to choose my way through the grief, I really need you to understand that the man I'm describing didn't exist just a few years earlier. The version of me who lost his dad would not have made it to that 4 o'clock coaching session. He would have canceled, and then he would have disappeared. He would have gone dark. But something changed between losing my dad and losing Jim, and it didn't change by accident. There were really two people who changed everything for me. The first of those two people was a grief counselor. I went to talk to her because the grief, the despair, and the depression was ruining me. It was killing me. I told her that I was feeling overwhelmed, that I was feeling ambushed by the grief, and I felt completely out of control. And then she said something that sounded crazy to me at the time. In fact, it sounded totally insane. She told me to schedule my grief. I had no idea how to respond. So I asked, schedule my grief? How in the world can you schedule your grief? She said, that's easy. You put it on the calendar, set a date, set a time, make an appointment with grief. And when that appointment shows up, show up for the appointment. Give yourself permission to cry, to remember, to feel. Schedule your grief. I thought grief was a thing that just happened to you. But what this counselor showed me was that grief was a thing that I could choose to meet. And the moment that I understood that, a lot of the weight came off because I was no longer bracing for impact. I had a way to take back control. The second person that made a big difference in my life was my coach. In the last couple of years, I've hired a coach, and he taught me a principle that I hadn't really ever considered before. He taught me that I could decide how I was going to feel, not just react to what was happening to me, but that I could choose my emotional state. In fact, I could even choose it ahead of the events themselves, that I could be the master of my emotions instead of being a slave to my emotions. Now, if you can hold on to those ideas for just a minute, they're the entire engine of what comes next. I'd like for you to think about those two ideas. Number one, you can schedule when to feel something. And number two, you can choose what you're going to feel. Grief taught me the first one. Coaching taught me the second. And then on June 24th, life asked me to use both skills at the same time. So let me take you back to my office. In the moment that I received that text message, I'm waiting to begin my 4 o'clock coaching session. 3:43, and Jim is gone. I've got 17 minutes before two people sit down across from me, a couple that I've known for years, but meeting them for the first time as their coach. They were trusting me with their future with their goals and with their dreams. And I wanted to show up for them the way that they needed me to. If I'm being honest, initially every part of me wanted to cancel. I wanted to close the door, turn off the lights, go dark, and grieve. I wanted to stop and let the grief overwhelm me, just like it always had before. For me, this was a defining moment because in that moment, I realized that I had a choice to make. And it was not the choice between coaching and grieving. It was the choice between which emotion I was going to bring into the next 60 minutes of my life. My circumstance was grief, but I did not choose that. And I knew I could change it. It was a defining moment because I realized that I had a choice. I had a choice between grieving or showing up as the coach that I wanted to be. I could choose my emotion. I could schedule my grief. That moment became a defining moment for me because I realized in that moment that I had a choice. I could choose to grieve or I could choose to show up as the world-class coach that this couple was expecting. My circumstances were grief, but I could choose my inner stance and become the coach that this couple needed. So what did I do? I made an appointment with my grief. I used the tools that my counselor had taught me. I didn't push it aside or suppress the emotion. I simply opened my calendar and put on that calendar that night I was going to grieve. I was going to allow the full expression of grief. I was going to miss Jim and I was going to mourn his loss. But at 4 o'clock, I needed to be a coach. So I chose a different emotion. I didn't fake happiness. I didn't pretend that Jim hadn't died. I chose presence. I chose to be steady. I chose the state of a man who had been entrusted with one of the most important hours in someone else's week. The couple never knew. For them and for me, it was a great session. Present, clear, powerful, useful. They walked out with clarity and confidence, and that was the point. And then at 6 o'clock that evening, I stood in front of another room of aviators and spoke about charitable aviation, about the exact work that Jim had poured his whole life into, just hours after I learned that he was gone. Twice that day, I had to choose my inner stance. And then I went home and I kept my appointment with grief. I let the grief come and I grieved my friend, my mentor, my role model. And in some ways, I still do. And this is what I'd really like for you to hear. It's not about burying anything. It's not about suppressing what was real. It was simply about choosing a different emotion for a small season so that I could serve someone else and then showing up for the appointment that I made with grief later that evening. There's a big difference between delaying grief and denying it. One is mastery, and the other thing is a wound that you're going to pay for later. So here's the principle that I hope you walk away with. Innerstance over circumstance. Two people can face the same circumstance, the same diagnosis, the same layoff, the same loss, the same breakup, the same open door, and they can walk away with completely different lives. The variable is not the circumstance. That's the same. The variable is the emotional posture that each of them choose to hold in the circumstance. And here's the reality is high performers, people who have been doing mindset work for years, sometimes they let circumstance decide the emotion. I love these words that Vincent van Gogh wrote to his brother Theo. Let us not forget that the little emotions are the great captains of our lives, and we obey them without realizing it. These little emotions, not even the big dramatic ones, the quiet frustration that we feel, that low hum of anxiety, that little teeny doubt that slips in and takes the wheel before you even notice it's driving. That's what's running most people's lives, quietly and without permission. And they shape your identity because who you are is not what you say you are, it's what you feel consistently. Now, what is the science behind the principle that we're discussing? Dr. Joe Dispenza has done some of the most amazing work in the world that lives at the intersection of neuroscience and human transformation. What he found is this: when you hold an elevated emotion long enough, gratitude, love, inspiration, your body cannot tell the difference between that emotion and the real life event that would normally cause it. Think of that for a minute. You can't tell the difference, which means when you choose to feel like your future self before the future has arrived, you begin to become that person ahead of the physical evidence. Here's how Dr. Dispenza put it in his book, Becoming Supernatural. By intentionally choosing to feel the elevated emotions of the heart rather than waiting for something outside of yourself to elicit those emotions, you become who you are truly meant to be, a heart-empowered individual. Now, most people get that backwards. They wait. They wait for the promotion to feel valuable, for the relationship to feel worthy, for the result to feel like they're enough. And the waiting itself becomes the ceiling that they bump up against, because every day that you wait, you are training your nervous system that you're not yet the person you're trying to become. Now, you're probably sitting there thinking, Alan, I hear you, but how do you do it? How do I actually change my emotional state when life hits? Well, let me give you a simple tool. It's not mine. It comes from Tony Robbins in Awaken the Giant Within, and he calls it the triad. 3 simple levers, 3 forces that shape every emotional state that you will ever feel. The first lever that you can pull is physiology, or what you do with your body. I love that Tony says that motion creates emotion. Simple motions, your posture, your breath, your face. Are you smiling? The way that you move. Are you standing tall, breathing deep? Are you moving with energy? All of those things can produce a positive emotion. Remember, motion creates emotion. The second lever is focus. I like to say what you see. Tony says where your focus goes, energy flows. If you're focused on the problem, you're going to feel stuck. If you're focused on the potential or on the solution, you're going to feel empowered. Same situation, completely different state. Your brain will lock onto whatever you focus on. So focus on solutions, focus on solving the challenges, not on being overcome by them. The third lever that anyone can pull is what you say, the words that you use. Now, these can be the words that you say inside your head, or they can be the words that come out of your mouth. Either way, the words that we use have power. Saying, I'm failing is a very different experience than saying, I'm learning. The circumstance could be exactly the same, but the words that we use to describe our circumstance can have a profound impact on our inner stance. And that's the triad: physiology, focus, and language. Or what I'd like to say is what you see, what you say, and what you do. You are never at the mercy of your emotional state because you have control over those 3 levers: what you see, what you say, and what you do. And by changing any one of those three, you can change how you feel right now. Let's go back to June 24th. I made a decision. I slowed my breath. I moved my focus from grief to gratitude and to being there for two people that needed me in that moment. I changed the words running through my head, and I made an appointment with something that would be difficult for later that evening. I didn't really know at the time that I was running the triad, but I was. So I'd like for you to think of this. Your identity is not only what you say you are, and it's not only what you do, but it's also what you feel consistently. You can say, I'm confident 100 times a day, but if underneath those words you still feel hesitant or afraid or unworthy, you're going to find some friction. Now, I'm a big believer in affirmations. I believe that the words I am have power, and that if you say I am confident enough times, you'll feel confident. However, I also know that when you learn how to be intentional with your emotions and you match the emotion of being confident with the words of being confident, that you can change who you are literally overnight. You can choose to feel like your future self right now. You can choose that today before you've even proven anything. You start declaring, you start choosing, and you start embodying the person that you want to become. You say it, you see it, and you do it, and then you become it. And this isn't all woo woo. It's a simple practical skill that you can build because you can always choose your inner stance, not because the circumstances get easier, but because you got stronger. Jim spent his life lifting grieving people up off the ground so that they could rise above their pain and see possibility again. The morning that we lost Jim, I had to do for myself the exact thing that he had spent his life doing for others. And I think that's the best tribute that I could ever pay to Jim. Blue skies and tailwinds, Jim. Thank you for teaching me how to rise. If you're a pilot, or if you've ever thought about giving your time to something bigger than yourself, please go to www.angelflightwest.org and become a volunteer. If you know someone in a hard season who needs to reach care that they can't otherwise get to, Angel Flight West can help at no cost because of people just like Jim. I'll leave you with the words that Jim left for all of us. Do as much as you can, for as long as you can, for as many as you can, and in an airplane if you can. Be powerful, be present, be there. I'm Alan Underwood. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.